back to the Worldview media channel. I'm here again with Samuel Tshisekedi, and we're now continuing our series on Jordan Peterson's book 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos. And we're up after a break for a couple of weeks.
Yes, we did.
We're up to chapter 5.
Yeah.
Which is, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them.
That's quite a title.
It is.
That's quite a, the title of the chapter is quite, it's I think it's, you can take it, oh, hang on a minute, do I let my children do this? But deep down as you start to make the case, you sort of get to see what it means.
Essentially, the chapter is about raising children and discipline. But it's an unusual way to introduce the topic. And I think what he's sort of saying is that it is possible to dislike your children. And that we shouldn't underestimate our capacity to build up resentments toward our children, and then to behave in ways toward them which is actually out of resentment.
And being detrimental to the children.
and he makes the point that if you, as a parent who loves your child, can get to the point where you're tempted to dislike them for their behavior, then what hope do they have in the world? If you're their best advocate in life, and you're struggling to put up with them, then the world is going to be very, very cruel to them. So he sort of debunks this myth that disciplining your children is there's this sort of contemporary theory that any kind of chastisement or punishment or even hitting physical discipline of your children is somehow damaging them and programming them to be violent in turn. He debunks that myth and makes the point that if you say no to your children, there has to be a consequence of some kind. And if you can't teach your children that there are negative consequences to antisocial behavior, then the world will teach them that lesson in a far cruel way down the track. So
it is quite significant. Just looking at the way he introduces the chapter, he gives you a bit more of sort of backing, backstories to try to sort of make his case. When he says, well, actually, it's not okay. For example, of course, when you have, we already live in a society that, in my analysis, the society is very, while society loves kids because they're cute and they're like, baby's nice, but there's a limit to that. They live in a society where there's some level of intolerance for certain things that children do in an environment where they're adults. For example, let's say if you're catching a flight and you're flying from A to B, okay? If you were sitting, on a flight with a child that was just simply crying, screaming, throwing temper tantrums and chucking things around, to a certain degree, you can smile out of politeness. At some point, you're going to go, well, look, can you just, make sure you take care of your child? Because why should you, be made uncomfortable just because somebody had a child on that plane that they cannot actually basically control and discipline? And even parents, we get to sit with, parents who are struggling with the children, but don't mean to bring you, your own personal story. You're a father and I'm a father, but actually, when you've had twins, and they're beautiful children, you love them, but at the beginning of their life, where they can't differentiate between the day and night, so they don't sleep throughout the night, and you are made to sleep so that you can care for them really well. And I was like that with Matthew, even Shafar as well, my two little ones. And so you you stay up there all night, you haven't slept. And so during the day, you're trying to sleep and do everything else. So there is a certain level of tolerance you will have until you hit that really limit. And there are people who have reacted out of just desperation. This way you have, postnatal depression and stuff like that. Yeah. And so that's when they're babies.
Yeah.
But when they start to become toddlers, and they start to because you need to teach them certain things to give them the sense of how the world works. And I like it from a Christian perspective. God gives parents children because you have a deposit of love for them, that you can actually take in all those behaviors while you're trying to teach and correct them. The other person who's not their parent is not under any obligation to tolerate that kind of. They don't have the deposit of that kind of love. Yeah. And so therefore, as a parent, you must be able to make sure that your kids do things that you as a parent still got a deposit to carry along while you teach them. But the world doesn't have such deposit. There's no reason for why another person should have to put up with my child throwing mud at them and throwing temper tantrum. Why should they do that? Yeah. And so if you don't teach your children when they're little to do things in such a way that they will be pleasant to the world and interact socially, the world will be cruel to them. And so that's the point he's making, like saying that he was in the airport and there was this kid that was for 3 whole hours just throwing, and the child did it like deliberately, every 20 minutes. And so to the point that the parents feel embarrassed and they don't know what to do. And so disciplining your children is not, as you're saying, according to those myths, that somehow it's detrimental.
Yeah. I look at the whole issue of discipline being, because we look at, we tend to think of discipline as in the negative sense, that it's, a penalty for bad behavior. But I tend to think that the nurture of parenthood and the love and affection you give a child serves the exact same purpose as the punishment and discipline that you give your children. In that, what it's doing is it's defining boundaries. It's saying, within this area you're secure, you're affirmed, and you're safe. Yeah. And if that's where the electric fence is. Yeah. Don't touch it. And if you go outside that, then there's penalties. And I've always found that a well and consistently disciplined child, when they have loving and affectionate parents, are always very emotionally stable individuals. Yeah. And of course, there's obviously a wrong way to do discipline. That I think, Peterson makes the case that the magnitude of, when you're talking about physical discipline, like hitting a child, magnitude is important. Like, he makes the point that if magnitude wasn't important, there'd be no difference between raindrops and atomic bombs. Exactly. Giving your child a little smack to remind them where the boundaries are isn't abusive. No. But of course, it would be very easy to hit a child in a way that would be abusive. Yeah. So magnitude is important, but also the consistency is important. If there's no point telling, I think it's psychologically damaging to a child to have parents that are inconsistent or parents that disagree about where the lines are. Yeah. Because that way the child never knows where the line is. One day the line is here, the next day the line is here, the next day the line is here. The child doesn't know where they stand. Yes. So that's not going to produce an emotionally secure child. Yeah.
I think that the whole process must be viewed from a perspective of what is the end game here. So in other words, what's the purpose? And right now, my reading and my take, especially, just bear with me when I go at it, when it comes to the Western world, is that, we, in the West, we have, first of all, we've got small families. So in Australia, our population replacement level is 1.9. So, if families go 3, people say, oh, that's a bit too much. If you say, I've got 5 kids, people are like, huh, what? And so it's basically the boundaries on 2 or 1 child. And people set their lives up how they like it and how they love it. They go and have fun, and then they have their kids very late. They really, really, really want to have their kids. And therefore the child is ahead as this precious object. Now, I'm not saying object is an objectified thing, like you have a glass, but I'm saying that the child is a human being, but they're so precious that you will notice parents cherish that when they're still little babies, everybody go, oh, they're so cute. And so with that, the child is being had for one purpose, to fulfill the inner desire and of the parent. We have a child. The child fulfills our desire. I think that's a very interesting departure, to say the least. I'm not going to put any other connotation on it. But I would say the reason we have a child, especially from a Christian perspective as a Christian minister, is to perpetuate the human species. Let's start there from an evolutionary point of view, and then I'll go a Christian point of view. Perpetuate the species. Why? Because you want to have in the world grown-up, mature people like you who can fully function in society, advance society, have children of their own that they can train the same way to fully function in society. That's the purpose, not just because, oh, I want to have a child. I see this all the time. There's you see a couple and they see a little baby, and then the wife looks at the husband and says, oh, I feel like another one.
Like a
really?
puppy. Yeah.
They're not puppies, right? Yeah. And so, from a Christian perspective, we have children so that we can teach them God's ways, so that they can teach their children God's way. What does that mean? To live in a world where they're mature and function and contribute to society. So once they're born, you basically have a race against time. The biological clock is ticking. And so their mental, psychological, and emotional clock is that which you're working with, because you're building that. Yeah. The biological clock, you're feeding them physically, but you also need to feed them mentally, you need to feed them emotionally. This is where teaching them the boundaries are. So you see, there are boundaries in the world. People sometimes think they don't have a boundary until somebody crosses their boundary. The reason why you feel upset when somebody did something that you didn't like is because they've crossed your boundary. And so when the children grow up and they don't get given the boundaries, and they don't get just simply given the boundary to understand the general boundaries in the world, but also other people have got boundaries. So they go in the world and without knowing there are boundaries, and they accidentally, something just sometimes innocently cross someone's boundary, and the person reacts, either rejects them, and so that they're shocked, like, what did I do? And next time now they don't know where to put their foot, and guess what? The consequences are they're anxious. Because rejection is basically, there's rejection galore. They don't know exactly what did I do wrong. And there are people who reject you without even telling you what you did wrong. You cross their boundaries, they reject you. So therefore, we have this problem in the Western world, exactly, that is that it's at an endemic level of teenagers' anxiety. And so it is a consequence of a generation that had just been growing up without boundaries at all. Social boundaries are not taught, and so that's the consequence you have there.
I love to tell the story about how I was riding on the train from Belgrade into the city once, and this group of really unruly teenagers got on the carriage, and they were loud, they were abusive, they were using profane language. They had alcohol, which they were drinking in front of everybody, and they were just using vulgar language, loud. And they came and sat next to me, and and I was sitting there wondering, how do I negotiate this? How do I bridge this communication gap? And I just started quietly praying, and this girl who was dressed inappropriately had her back to me, and she accidentally bumped me, and she swung around and said sorry to me, and I thought, they're not the anarchists they want to appear to be, because
there's still some sort of sense of some rules there.
And so there wasn't much opportunity to engage with them, but a couple of stations along, most of them got off, and there was one guy who was dark figure wearing a hood. He switched seats and was sitting next to me and looking past me as his friends got off on the platform, and he was waving to him, and something welled up within me, and it must have been the Holy Spirit, because it was not something I normally would have said, and it surprised me that I'd said it, and I said to him, you admire your friends, do you? And he said, oh yeah, they're great. And I said, well, take a look at them, because they're all going to be dead by the time they're 30. And then while he was recoiling from that blunt assault, I said, and so will you be if you don't change your ways. And he looked down and he went quiet, and he was thinking about what I said. And then he opened up to me and told me about some personal problems he was going through. And it was like, here for the first time, he was seeing an older father figure confront him in a way that was actually loving. And I wasn't rejecting him. I could have abused him for his behavior, but I was reaching out to him, and we had a lovely conversation. And he told me some deeply personal things, and I was able to give him some encouragement and some counsel. And I didn't realize at the time, but there were other people sitting at a distance who was observing this. And one little old lady, she was getting off the train, she patted me on the shoulder and she said, keep up the good work.
Right.
But it just illustrated to me that everybody needs boundaries, and young people today, they're not as rebellious as we think they are. I mean, we may be confronted by some of the behaviours we observe and everything, but maybe they just haven't heard anything else.
Exactly.
You and I, we did some street preaching in Bendigo, and I think, like me, you were surprised at how receptive some of the young people were to us. I remember being in the park, and I got up on the rotunda to preach, and there was some guys sitting up there having a drink, some young teenagers, and I said, you guys mind if I do this here for a few minutes? And they just nodded and they sat, and I said, have a listen and see what you think. And I preached the gospel, and then they were listening the whole time, and we had a very respectful conversation afterwards. And I'm thinking that many young people today are so neglected in just being taught about boundaries and being taught about right and wrong, and certainly being taught about faith. Some are so they're so neglected in terms of getting any kind of spiritual education that they haven't even been given the prejudices of their parents' generation. It was, if you talk to their parents, they probably made a conscious decision not to expose their children to religion. But the consequence of that is these kids are not anti-religious. They just don't know. They just don't know, and there's a kind of purity and innocence there, and a spiritual hunger too, because they've not rejected anything. They just haven't been told.
I think in the past it used to be, if you have a child and you don't feed them physically, you'll be accused of child abuse. You're basically neglecting a child, so you neglect. But over time, we've actually started to realize as a society that there is also psychological abuse. There is emotional abuse, and I would go as far as they consider emotional and psychological abuse if you're saying bad things and abusing the child with your language and so on and so forth. But I actually think that neglecting to feed the mind of your child with a sense of purpose, with a sense of there are set of information that the child needs to know to have a certain view, rounded view of the world and how to interact with the world, whether it is the, we've got the world of objects. You can say to your child, don't touch the stove, it's hot and it's going to burn you. So how not to interact with the physical world. But there's also how to not interact with the mental world, the moral world. There is a world of morality that is, how do we know there's a world of morality? We know that there are things that are wrong, there are things that are right. The reason why when the girl bumped you and she said sorry, she recognized that was not morally okay to do. Right? She wouldn't have bumped into a chair and said sorry to the chair. So we live in a world where there is a world of objects, physical objects. We live in a world of moral things that are there. We know stealing is wrong. And so if we don't teach to our kids that there is a world of moral things that are objective, so they'll bump into the moral world and they'll be shocked as when you didn't tell them there's a chair, then they bump into it and they get hurt. And so, but I think though, the generation before this, there have been two generations, starting from baby boomers, who generally started to conceive the world of morality as a subjective world rather than an objective one. Rules are just simply whatever you make of it. Morality, things are right or wrong as you just, you make up your own mind.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you do as long as you don't hurt anyone.
Exactly.
If it feels good, do it.
Then do it.
Yeah.
So this generation started to neglect, they've been good at buying every single gadget to their kids, everything that opens and shuts physically, but they've left the world of morality of their kids to who knows what. And so the kids then go around in the world without knowing what's socially acceptable.
They've left the moral education of their children to MTV.
Think about
and
that.
The internet.
Yeah, exactly.
And YouTube.
So it's YouTube, it's Hollywood, and so therefore these kids are basically being mentally neglected. The world of education was left to the schools. And over time, the schools now have become like some tools of proper discipline have been taken away from the schools. And the teachers, sometimes I feel sorry for the teachers. The teachers don't really have enough tools to be able to, why? Because maybe one or two teachers did something abusive. And then therefore, all the tools of, proper education. So parents can't say no to their kids. Teachers can't say no to their kids. And then they go into the world of employment. They find out that the boss is going to say no. And if you do this and don't do what the boss says, they're going to sack you. And they're going to basically send you. And you find yourself now, and many kids have basically, we live in a generation of children who've been, they've grown up, they are unable to hold a job. Because they don't understand. And so what I'm trying to say is, this thing has been building up generationally. And I'll make a point about people who think that disciplining is always abusive. I'll make a point about that later. But what do you think?
Well, yeah, I agree. And I guess what's worse within the education system now is we have what's really state-sponsored abuse, because when it comes to sexual morality and how all that the school is actively corrupting children's minds.
Violating their innocence. Trying to teach kinder kids about things that sexually that is not even on their level. So
so don't get me started on what the Victorian government is doing in our school system and at a state level. This is not a political discussion.
We might go there, but here's one thing. As I was saying, the person who says that discipline is always abuse reasons in a circle. They assume that conclusion. Because think about it. When a parent tells their child, do not touch that stove, it'll burn you. And why are they saying that? It's because they don't want the child to get hurt. Now, there are things in life that you can learn by experience. There are things that you don't. Now, for example, if I say to you, like, if you stand in front of a, 1,200 let's say 120 ton truck. I don't know whether that's a measurement. They're 120 ton truck. And it's coming at you at the speed of, let's say, 70 kilometers an hour. If it hits you, you will be badly injured, perhaps you'll die. And you say, well, yeah, I want to try that. I want to test that myself. I want to know by personal experience. And there are things you don't need to learn by personal experience. You'll be dead and then you won't have learned it, okay? And so if the parent sees that there is something the child is doing, that at the moment they don't have any understanding in a way of explanation, therefore a little bit of a little smack gives them a little taste of something discipline-wise to say, this will hurt you. Now, I say a parent must always, as the child starts to develop understanding. Very often, this is my theory about children. Parents think that you've got to wait until the child is 6, 7, 10 to get know. Actually, kids start to understand things very, very early on. By the time you talk to them when they're still babies, they're building this understanding up. By the time they're 1 year old, you don't wait to wait for when they are, temper tantrum throwing 2 years old. They're capable of understanding. Build the understanding, explain to them why. The why is very important. Over time, you can then phase out here's the rule, but tell them why the rule is there. And so, if you start that, then you can have a good way of instilling the reasons why discipline is there.
And I think that comes later. I think training your children to be obedient to you before they can understand why is beneficial for them too. I know a parent who strongly believed that you should teach your children to obey without question when they're very young. And they cited an example of their daughter. They were talking to some friends on the street, and their daughter, who was just a toddler, wandered away. They knew they were walking in that direction. And, by the time the parents realised that the child had wandered away, they were up ahead, about to cross the road. And
oncoming vehicles.
And the father started to run to the child. But he knew he wasn't going to get there in time. So he yelled out the name of the child and he said, "Stop!" And the child, who was accustomed to being obedient to the child, to their loving father, immediately stopped and turned around and came back. And quite probably saved the child's life. So this one of the other myths about parenting is that you've got to explain everything to your children. Well, there's a time for understanding. But training in obedience is
first and foremost,
is life-giving.
Because there will be things, even as adults right now, my brother, we don't have all the insight. Somebody can say to you, look, this decision you're making, my dad actually told me that when I was already grown up, I was in my 20s, he said to me, this decision you're making will really cause you a lot of heartaches. Now, I looked at every factor that I could see at the time and I thought my dad was wrong, right? And guess what?
He was right.
He was right. He had seen more than I had. He couldn't explain to me all the things at the time because I could not have understood what he was saying. What I'm trying to say is the bond of love, if one starts by, this is why the people who think that parents who discipline their kids do it out of hate and abuse, they just miss the point. They're reasoning in a circle. Why? Because the bond of love is the first thing that starts between the parents and their kids. Now, is there abusive parents out there? Yes, they are. But you do not take the exception and then determine the general rule. Generally, those very people who say that they are parents, they know how much they love their kids, right? And so when the bond of love is there, you can receive a don't do this, and it's purely because the parent doesn't want you to get hurt. And so that if in Africa, the way we do is, one of the things we do well, and I'm happy to say this, we do really, really well, is we establish parental authority first. As I am as a grown-up, there is a particular way I can speak to my father, even if I am right. There is a particular way I cannot speak to my father. Why? Because He established that parental authority to protect me. So that, as you're saying for that child there, that when the dad says, stop, the child will say, why? I'm going to keep going. And so, and that's the first thing. The person who assumes that it's always, in the name of abuse that the parent disciplines the child, have missed the entire purpose. The purpose is to grow the child to understand the boundaries in life, and it's done in love. And if a parent abuses a child, they've done the wrong thing. Okay. And that's the first thing. But the other thing that I found quite interesting is this idea that Jordan Peterson talks about. Are you a parent or a friend? Like, how can the parent assume, look, I see parents who are like, I want to be my daughter's best friend. No. Because think about it. Friends do not correct, do not instruct. Even if they give you instruction, it's like whether you or not. And friends don't really rebuke. If you really want to assume the position, so the parents must maintain the position of the parents to be able to say, now, what if by that they mean try to get into your child's world, to understand from this perspective. Yes, there's a point to that, no problems. But whatever we learn in life, we always learn it from a place of authority first. When you go to the doctor gives you medication, prescription, and they say, okay, well, take 2 a day from me today. You know why you take it? Because you accept their authority. They're learned, they've been educated, they have all the credentials. If they were your friend, just say, oh, let's take these 2 pills. You can say, right, yeah, take it or I don't, And so when the police says to you, stop, you don't stop because they're your friend. You stop because of the authority of the state they carry. And this is why if you had a policeman who was your friend, someday they might say, stop, you go, well, why should I? You're a mate,
When parents say they want to be their children's friend, I don't think they're even saying that. I think really what they're saying is they want to be popular. They want to be liked. They want to be loved. Yeah. And, I think, and we might have to close it here because I think we're out of time, is that you have to, like Abraham, you have to be prepared to sacrifice that aspect of your relationship with your child, being popular. It's you have to be prepared to give your children to God. And to know that the whole reason why you're raising children is because you're actually fulfilling a mandate from God to bring forth godly offspring, and that you can't always be popular with your kids if you're going to be you're going to discipline them properly.
I was going to think before we finish. There was a principle that Jordan Peterson brings up here, and I thought it's so insightful. I know each person can basically get the book and read it, but he starts with the when it comes to physical punishment, it says minimum necessary force. You started talking about it at the beginning. It's a straightforward idea. Rules should not be multiplied beyond necessity. Alternatively stated, bad laws drive out respect for good laws. So if you're going to be able to establish the boundary for discipline, start by establishing very good principles and set the stage. Let the child know what the stages of escalations are, and let them, because sometimes kids are confused. They did something they thought was small, and the parent just came, you could be too harsh. And so if you say, hey, look, if you do this, this will be, like with our kids, we negotiate. If you do this and this privilege can be taken away. And I always said to them, you get the privilege taken away, or sometimes if it's severe, sort of minimal physical punishment, and then you can escalate from there to say, I actually say to my son, punishment is for those who lack understanding. Because once you understand why this is in place, you see, I said to him, as your father, there's nobody standing here with a stick waiting to punish me for me to do what is right. Because I understand what is right. Now, if I was on the street and the speed limit is, let's say, 60 km an hour, and I was doing 80, when the police shows up, they give me a fine, I lose points. Sometimes you could lose your license. If it's 20 kilometers, you are going to lose your license. and then you get to live with the consequences of your decisions. And so if I lack understanding, the police is going to do that. Okay, but if the police comes and realize I was doing something that I didn't really realize, one day I got into the church car park and I crossed the double solid line, and I didn't realize what I was doing. And they saw that I was very repentant for what I did. They gave me a warning. And guess what? Ever since that day, that warning was enough.
Yeah.
But if then the police caught me doing it again, now I've lacked understanding. Now 3 points will be gone. I'll have a big fat fine, and if I do it again, I'll lose my license. So it's staged. It escalates for people who lack understanding, and kids do get that. And so I like the principle that says, look, good law must be asserted. If we set bad law, then it might end up, affecting, good purpose.
So don't confuse your kids with too many rules.
No,
Keep it simple.
Simple, straightforward.
Yeah.
Stage it. If there's escalation, they know themselves, okay, I did this twice, therefore this is escalating, and so on and so forth.
Good advice. Yeah, good advice. Well, there you have it. We're going to conclude there. 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, Jordan Peterson. We've been talking about disciplining your children, chapter 5, wasn't it?
Yeah, chapter 5. Fantastic.
Yeah, so thank you, Samuel.
No worries. Thanks for inviting me back again.
Yeah.
I'm loving the discussions.
We might have a bit of a break. I have to go and get some cosmetic surgery tomorrow, so that might be. I don't know how much healing time there will be in that.
That's okay.
Yeah. So thank you for watching, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye.